Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Jesus Christ Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Mudiji Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Anantaji Ki Jai.
Beloved Father, who dwells within the soul of my being, whose name is I Am, veneration to your holy name. Thy kingdom is here. Thy will prevails throughout the earth, as it does in the heavenly realms of my soul. You open your hands and satisfy the hunger of all living beings. You heal all hearts of sorrow, so that they in turn may show forgiveness to those whose minds are shrouded in the ignorance of the self. Beloved Mother, who imparts to all the sense of choice, so we may finally come to choose you, who are truth, and thus find everlasting freedom. Glory to your name, O truth. For yours is the kingdom of existence, of peace and love. All power and glory emanates from you alone, who imparts to all the wisdom, light, love, and courage to refer to themselves as I am. Amen. Om.
So today I continue reading from Adyashanti, Resurrecting Jesus. We're on part 9 of the readings I've given. I think we're on part 6 of chapter 2, Trials and Tribulations. And Adyashanti is going to speak to us of the journey after awakening. What comes as we enter the next phase of our spiritual journey. I'm very much enjoying reading this. Very happy to share it with you. So, trials and tribulations. And this chapter opens with a quote from Saint Teresa of Avila. Saint Teresa of Avila was a Christian mystic. We find many Christian mystics referred to in this book. It's far more than just the story of Jesus Christ, it's our own story, story of our own journey, story of our fathers' journeys, our spiritual fathers, Muji and Ananta. It's the story of awakening. So, Saint Teresa of Avila said, to have courage for whatever comes in life, everything lies in that. For me, it feels this would mean more, not that we must be brave and fierce and warrior-like, but the courage to accept, the courage to take whatever comes, to take whatever shows up in our life. Today, now. For me, this is what's showing up right now. 6 a.m. Sunday morning. This body, the words of Adyashanti, the words of Jesus Christ, the words of Saint Teresa of Avila, Guruji peeking over my shoulder, and a cockerel crowing somewhere. After awakening, we enter into the next phase of the spiritual journey. In awakening, we suddenly recognize our true nature. We recognize that we are not the egoic personality we thought we were, but divine being, the radiance of consciousness itself. At some point, following this recognition, it's as if the world responds by giving us very specific tests and trials. Excuse me. It's as if the world responds by giving us very specific tests and trials in which we will be asked to engage life from the awakened state, to manifest it and act from it. Realizing the reality of our being is one thing, but being able to embody it is something else entirely. This reminds me of a quote from Mujiji, which I kept written on a blackboard outside my little caravan in the forest for most of last year. Now it feels engraved on my heart, these words. That I know Guruji says don't make a tattoo out of anything you say. And yet somehow these words speak to me from within. And that is, blessed is the one whose life is the very evidence of truth. Blessed is the one whose life is the very evidence of truth. I'm certain we can say that about Jesus Christ. I'm certain we can say that about Mujiji. I'm certain we can say that about Anantaji. There's very little else that I'm certain about, but it's enough. So realizing the reality of our being is one thing, but being able to embody it is something entirely different. The trials and tribulations of life are challenging, but they actually help us begin to act and manifest our realization in the world of time and space, in our daily lives. If we look at the life of Jesus, we see it was one long, continuous trial that shows us, time and again, how spirit moves in the world of time and space. And so in this chapter now, looking at the trials and tribulations of the life of Jesus Christ, and that Adyashanti suggests that we experience in the path of our own awakening. I know I've had many trials and tribulations in my life, and perhaps the most were in the last year. And they're all good. If you are masters say, it's all grace. If you're experiencing trials and tribulations in your life today, I hope you're listening to this, to know that it's good. It's fine. Everything's fine. The first temptation. Immediately following his awakening, Jesus enters the wilderness to fast for 40 days and 40 nights. The Gospel of Matthew says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." Matthew chapter 4, verse 1, in the New International Version of the Bible. This motif of entering a place of tests and trials is very ancient, very universal. The Buddha has much the same experience under the Bodhi tree. The Bodhi tree is really symbolic for the tree of life, so the Buddha is sitting in a lush place, quite different than the desert where Jesus goes. Yet he is tempted in equal measure, assaulted by the forces of Maya. In Buddhism, Maya represents illusion. It plays the same role as Satan or the devil in Christianity. The difference is that the Maya is the impersonal force of illusion and misunderstanding in the universe. It's not out to destroy you with an evil intent. In the Christian story, Satan is the personification of illusion. And because of this, Satan takes on a much darker, more sinister quality. So Jesus is led out into the desert, where he encounters Satan. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, He was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Now imagine that you fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. You're going to be tired. You're going to be weak. You're going to be hungry. And along comes this dark force, whether something from outside you or from inside you, to tempt you at this moment of weakness. What it essentially says is, I know you're hungry. So if you're really a great awakened being, just do it. Just turn those rocks into bread. And Jesus and Jesus answers Satan, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes." I should try to continue one more time. If I continue to cough, I'll suspend this reading and redo it another day. It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. This first temptation has to do with the issues of fear and survival, which are really two sides of a single, extraordinarily powerful force. So this first temptation asks us, when you get afraid, when your well-being and even your survival are at stake, what do you fall back on? From where do your decisions arise? When you're afraid, do your decisions arise from fear? When you feel threatened, do you respond from your old conditioned self, your old conditioned sense of self-protection? Or do you still maintain a connection with that still point inside? That point of clarity and love inside, where you're not afraid, even when you're afraid. The place where love is greater than the instinct to survive. That place inside allows you to move through your fear, through even the desire to survive. We're often taught that our deepest instinct is the survival instinct. That when push comes to shove, all life forms in the universe seek first and foremost to survive. But in human beings, at least, we find that this isn't actually the case. There are times in life when people are more willing to put their lives on the line for someone or something, because there is a love that is deeper than the survival instinct that they can access and function through. Imagine a parent whose child is in the middle of the street with a car barreling towards them. You see in an instant that the only chance to save your child is to run into the street and to push them out of harm's way. There's not enough time to carry them to safety. Most parents would run right out in front of the car and push their child out of the way, even if they knew they were going to be struck and killed by the car. Most parents wouldn't even have to think. It would be an instinctive, instantaneous action. At such moments, we have transcended personal survival and tapped into our collective unity. Maybe you can remember such an experience as this. Something similar, though not as dramatic, occurs when you feel real compassion or empathy for someone, or sympathy. Each person's experience is his or her own. But when you meet someone who's suffering and you're open to them, available to them, you partake of their experience. Sure, it would be easier if you didn't partake of their experience, if you simply closed your heart and had no compassion. But the human heart has a deep capacity for connection. I know one example. I read about this, and I've certainly experienced this. Perhaps you're driving down the road, maybe on a motorway, and you come to a place where there's been very recently, maybe just a few moments before you, an accident, maybe a motorcyclist lying in the road, maybe you even see the accident happening. And in that moment, all concern for yourself, all concern for your own experiencing, all concern for your own suffering is gone. We're emptied of that. But what arises spontaneously and naturally is a response of feeling. We feel the pain. If we see someone fall off a bike, fall off a motorbike, run into a lamppost, so often we will go, ouch, if it's a small pain. Or we will physically recoil. if it's a more significant accident, because we feel their pain. We feel each other's pain. We're open. We don't close off to it. We don't deny it. We feel the pain, the suffering of others. And through that experiencing of others' suffering, we can also experience compassion arising, because we don't just perceive that they're suffering, we share in their suffering. We take some part of it into ourselves. At such moments, we have transcended personal survival and tapped into our collective unity. Something similar, though not as dramatic, occurs when you feel real compassion or sympathy for someone. Each person's experience is his or her own, but when you meet someone who's suffering and you're open to them, available to them, you partake of their experience. We have a saying, I feel for them, I feel for this person, but actually it's like we really mean, I feel with them. And there can only be one reason that we feel with them. It's because we're not apart from them. We all share each other's pain. It's why the news is so hard for so many people to listen to. Sometimes the mind gets hold of it, makes it into some absurd and extreme reality. But even just simple factual reporting of news, of suffering that's going on in the world, we feel it. We can't help but feel it. If we don't feel it, then we must be in denial. We must be shutting something out. We must be shutting the rest of the world out. We must be shutting the others out. When really, if our hearts are open, if we're open, then everything comes in. Pain, suffering, joy, bliss, happiness, all these of others. And there's only one thing that can close these doors and shut things out, and that's our mind. But we mustn't let it. We mustn't listen to it. And if we don't listen to it, it has no juice. We remain open. The human heart has a deep capacity for connection. I would suggest that our innate compassion arises from the intuition that we are not separate, that your concern is in some way mine as well, that your suffering is my suffering. This transcends separation and the desire for survival. This part of the Jesus story, with Satan and the temptations in the desert, can seem abstract. and kind of fanciful. But if you look at what the underlying metaphors are trying to say, you will find that it actually relates very much to daily life. There are many moments in any given week that life asks us, where are you going to operate from? What's your intention? What do you really value? Do you value connectedness and deep truth? Or do you value fear and survival? It's easy to say you value connectedness and truth, but when you're put in a situation where you feel uncertain, where you don't know the outcome, when acting from the deepest truth and love will cost you something, what are you going to do? What do you value the most? This is what Jesus is encountering here. And so we come to the second temptation of Jesus Christ. The second temptation has to do with hubris. Hubris is excessive pride or self-conscious, self-confidence. One could say arrogance, perhaps, as well. It is something we often come across in the path to awakening. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's been on this path who hasn't experienced this at some point or other, myself included. Hubris, the second temptation. It can be very subtle, it can be very, very large. I think we've all experienced hubris at times, when we get a little too high on ourselves, or think we're a little nobler than we actually are. Hubris, in this sense, can be unintentional, but in its darker aspect, hubris becomes real arrogance to the point of delusion. And this is where we must catch it, through vigilance. We mustn't buy it. Our masters tell us, don't buy any thought. Truly don't buy any thought. Especially these grand ones. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus' next temptation is described like this. Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Matthew chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. What Satan is saying here is, you're so great. Look what you've realized. Now prove it to me. Show off for me. Be someone special for me. Exercise this great enlightenment that you have. And Jesus answers him simply, do not put the Lord your God to the test. It's such a simple answer. It may seem antiquated, but what he's really saying is, I won't show off. Even though I'm the Son of God, I am not going to announce it. I'm not going to go out and prove it. I know, and that's enough. I will not be tempted to misuse my power. And as a human being, it is enough that you know. Or do you always have to be acknowledged for what you know? Do you have to seek out attention? Do you have to show off? Or if you attain great powers, will you be tempted into using them for self-serving purposes? Once again, what Jesus is showing us is what it looks like to align with our deeper truth. That's what is being conveyed here. When tested, what do you align with? Let me give two examples of how spiritual hubris might look. One is personal, and one is more observational. The personal example occurred not too long after my first awakening, which happened when I was 25 years old. Some months after that awakening, I was at my teacher's house, where I went every week, meditating with other students. I remember as I was sitting there meditating, all of a sudden, this sense of arrogance arose, and I found myself feeling very spiritually elevated compared to everyone else in the room. Even at the time, it was horrific to me. These thoughts would go through my mind of how much better I was than the others because I'd had this realization and they hadn't. This was hubris in the form of arrogance. It emerged from somewhere deep in the subconscious, and when it rose to the surface, it shocked and horrified me. Luckily, as soon as it arose, I saw it and knew that it was ridiculous. We often look back and laugh at these moments. I certainly didn't act on it. In fact, as I sat there, I tried all sorts of things to get rid of it. First, I just tried to resist it. I kept telling myself, I know this isn't true. I know this isn't real. But why is this happening? And so, The weeks went by, but each Sunday morning when I'd go to visit my teacher and be there with the other students, the same thing would happen as soon as I sat down. I even had a term for it inside of me. I called it arrogant guy. I went through all of my strategies to get rid of the arrogant guy. After resisting, which I knew wouldn't work anyway, I tried to accept it. Then I tried to lovingly, compassionately embrace the arrogance. I tried every trick in the book. After about 2 months of this recurring thought stream of arrogance arising in my mind, I was once again with my teacher on a Sunday morning, sitting with the group of students, and once again, as I was meditating, arrogant guy arose. I finally just realized there's nothing I can do about it. I can't get rid of it through resistance. I can't get rid of it through loving it. I can't get rid of it through hating it. I can't get rid of it through understanding it. So in that moment, I didn't try to do anything with it at all. I just saw it arise. No resistance, no indulgence, nothing. And when it arose in that space, where there was no relationship with it, all of a sudden, it literally just popped like a bubble, and it was gone. And I have to tell you, I was really, really relieved. So I was lucky in that instance, because I knew it wasn't true. I knew it was arrogance and saw it for what it was, but still I had to go through it. I've seen many people over lots of years have awakening experiences, and I've seen many ways that hubris can display itself. In Zen, we call this sort of hubris drunk on emptiness. The word emptiness means something akin to the word spirit. So drunk on emptiness suggests a sort of exuberance for the awakened state itself. When the awakened state first appears, often it is so new and unexpected that there's a certain kind of exaltation. It's simply part of the energy field of the awakened state, especially at the beginning. And it's very easy to get caught up in that exuberance, like having a new toy to play with. Most people who experience this spiritual hubris are not ill-intentioned, but nonetheless we can begin to lose touch with the very human dimension of life. We can become full of ourselves, and we can go around telling everybody that we know what's true. That's a very obvious form of arrogance. And this is why our masters tell us, why Papaji told Muji, why Muji tells us, why Muji told me, keep quiet. Keep quiet. Another form of hubris occurs when we are so taken up into our exalted state that we stop paying attention to our relative life. There's a story that relates to this and really highlights it. And it involves my teacher's teacher. Her teacher, a Zen master who had come over from Japan, was meeting with one of his with one of his senior students who had a wife and several children. One day the teacher asked him, "So how's your wife? How are the kids?" The student said, "You know, it's not really going that well." The teacher said, "So tell me what's going on." "Well," the student said, "my wife says I'm not paying attention to her. And the kids say I'm not spending enough time with them." And the teacher asked, "Well, are you?" "Well, you know, since I had this big spiritual shift, my spiritual life is comparatively so much more vital," the student answered. "It seems like this is the reality, and my family life doesn't seem as compelling or real to me anymore." There was a retreat coming up, and the teacher said, "I want both you and your wife to come to this next retreat." Well, being a good student, he agreed. And his wife agreed as well. And so they came to the retreat thinking that they would be sitting in meditation like you do at Zen retreats. Instead, the teacher called them both up and said, "I've set aside a room just for you. There's a bed in that room. And I want you both to spend the next 24 hours on that bed together. I don't care what you talk about. If you don't talk at all, if you're on opposite ends of the bed, I just want you to stay on that bed." The next day they came back and the teacher said, "So how's it going?" "Well," the student said, "you know, after about 10 hours on that bed, we started to have a chat. And we began to relate a little more." "Well, that's good," said the teacher. "Now I want you to spend another 24 hours on that bed together." And so it went over the entire 7-day retreat. They literally spent 7 days on the bed together. What happened over those 7 days is that when the student had to be with his wife and to confront what he was avoiding, eventually his own hubris started to break down. His sense of superiority, his sense that his wife and family couldn't understand him, his sense that they weren't as inherently valuable as the ultimate truth he had realized. All of it started to break down over those 7 days. And they started to talk and to relate once again. It saved his marriage. It saved his relationship with his kids. In a sense, it brought him back down to earth, not by pulling him out of what he had realized, by grounding the raw energy of the awakened state back into life and back into his family. He was very lucky that he had a family, because if you don't have something that can ground you, you can get really off balance at such times. It's good to be reminded that hubris, left unchecked, can have serious consequences in our lives. If we don't notice soon enough, we might just realize just too late that we've lost some very important things in our lives. The beauty of this story is that it reminds us, keep your feet firmly planted on the soil, keep your consciousness and your heart open, and stay available to this relative world and all the human beings with it. We shall end there. Let's hear a few words from Rikiji.
Beloved, all that you perceive is transient, is passing. But you are the unchanging one, timeless and perfect. Rid yourself of all delusions and come lay down here in the silence of being. For unlike time, you are not passing. You are the formless within all forms, the silence and stillness inside all movements of time and manifestation. Arise into the fullness of your real nature as the unchanging self, the goal and source of all being. Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Jesus Christ Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Mujiji Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Anantaji Ki Jai.